Game 4 is going to be on Berlingrad. In the bottom right, now with a point on the board, we have Zest. In the top left, it is the Red Terran GuMiho. So GuMiho SEV pulls into a guy who actually chronoed out Storm pretty quick. That is kind of the biggest thing about that last game. There's a lot of things leading up to it. And one of the biggest things is that what Zest was doing is pretty uncommon. But yeah, it really is just about Storm negating an SEV pull. And hey, that Raven really was very unimportant in the last game. GuMiho was completely bamboozled. But it was still far more of a normal TVP than the previous games. GuMiho did not proxy, he did not hide a barracks, he did not even engineering bay block. It was a straight up game until the SEVs were pulled, and then they pulled themselves into Storm. Not a good feeling. We'll see if GuMiho is, I guess, demoralized after such a game. Oh, I try and macro and this guy just completely wipes the floor with me. Oh boy. Or if he thinks that that was a bit of a fluke. As I said, the fast Storm follow-up build is not incredibly common. Storm as a whole in professional PvT is kind of not underwhelming, but just underutilized. You do see some people go for very fast Storm like Zest did, and they make sure to ferry the Storms around the Warp Prism. You do see Storm occasionally as that kind of mid-game splash technology. And you do sometimes see Storm in the very late game of this matchup, but one of the problems with Storm... Well, there's two problems with Storm, I suppose, that have made it less common than metas past. One, professional Terrans got really good at dealing with fast Storm builds. So either they just don't attack, and they drop instead, they pull the Protoss apart, or their Marauder count is higher than ever before because their macro got better since 2012, and... they split and dodge and weave and it's focus fire, and the High Templars are so expensive they don't leave much room for other good units. It's just a lot of, zealots, which can be migrated against. And two, if you get to a mid-game point, let's say the Terran's on 3 bases and the Protoss is trying to get to a 4th, the Terran gets into Ghosts kind of as a default. Because Ghosts are just universally good, even without their super powered EMP upgrade. Whatever your opinions on that upgrade, whatever you want to say. Without it, Ghosts are just good. If your opponent's going into Colossus, maybe you don't want to be super fast about Ghosts. You want to be a bit careful. But even then, we see people, once they're 3-base saturated, go to Ghosts. So, what are High Templars and Charge Lots bad against? Ghosts. So it's going to be very hard to actually use. And then as far as late game goes, by that point, they have 20 Ghosts with the supercharged EMP upgrade, and why would you even try? So we see Disruptor is really making a play in that mid to late game, but we'll get there if we get there in this particular map. Berlingrad, known for being a quick map, it is one of the shortest in the map pool. The Adepts, Chronos, right across the map, Shade, right into the Marines, classic. What Zest did made sense, trying to utilize the shortness of the map. What GuMiho made sense, trying to basically expect and defend that exact maneuver. So having the Marines a little farther forward is a real surprise for the Adepts, which 100% had to be combined together and had to be microing to really win that battle. So GuMiho gets a little bit of a lead here, a little bit. Not super much. Not going to be able to be aggressive on Zest's side of the map. By the looks of things, the Hellions just won't cut it. He's going to go for a fast armory build. GuMiho doing some odd GuMiho things. Oh, well, not that odd, actually. He's going for Widowmine drops. And we know that this is a thing. It's not as popular as a thing anymore, but it is a thing. And I think what it is really good against is Twilight builds that are very emphasized on the Twilight. So like a much later Robo, which if you're gonna go Twilight, you get Robo around this time anyways. That is, a Robo finishes around this time. But it is good against Stargate, not because it's guaranteed to work. As we see here. Phoenix do find it pretty quick. Probes are pulled into it. Widowmines, so you have to pull away from the Widowmines or lift them. There you go, lift them. Okay, so I didn't really get into the dynamic of this before we saw GuMiho's build just fall flat in its face, but trust me that there's a possibility that actually works. So hopefully this next one doesn't falter too. So the upside against a Stargate build is that there's not dependable detection. The oracles are going to have to zip around, hope they have enough energy to get all of these revelations off. The other thing is that even if it's a Phoenix follow-up, which GuMiho might have hoped that it wasn't, he was hoping it was going to be a Blink follow-up, the Phoenix oftentimes are not in position. So they don't kill the medevac. They don't pick up the Widow Mines. They respond only after the Oracle finally gets that pesky little revelation. So might happen here. But because the Phoenix were able to find it so quickly, that first drop was really unsuccessful. The second drop looking a lot better indeed. Because of course you have to wait for the Widow Mines if they're going to shoot again. You have to be very careful. So this is going to force a recall from Zest. He was doing some good damage on GuMiho's side of the map. But fair is fair. Those Widow Mines are going to be an increasingly larger problem. Ooh, almost lost more probes there. So he pulls everything back and ensures that he's going to be able to clean this up as fast as possible. One revelation necessary. Well, two, actually. This one's still alive. They'll get there when he gets there, I guess. He is at least very on the ball about the timing of the Widow Mine attack, so that is good. So, great. I feel a little bit better, you know, with the way I was explaining things. The first attack was a good example of why it isn't usually done versus a Stargate opener. And the second drop was a good example as to why it can still be a good example against a Stargate opener. So there you go. At the end of the day, though, all things done, and medevac probably gonna die. Who actually comes out ahead here? Well, with the worker count as it is, you'd say GuMiho. GuMiho is actually only behind 4 workers. You account for the 2 mules that Terran slapped down, and that means he's mining more minerals, and you can see that with this much better overlay than what DreamHack uses. Shots absolutely fired. So Zest is still doing a build ultimately with going for Blink as a follow-up, with Gateways as a follow-up, a build that's going to have a lot of stuff. Not necessarily the best stuff, but a lot of stuff. And you need a lot of stuff, you need a lot of economy. So the fact that he wasn't so much quicker to a perfect economy does hurt him a fair bit. But now he has gotten fully saturated on 3 bases as far as the minerals goes, because that is what's most important to him right now. And he can start cranking out more stalkers with 4 gases. Pretty much no problem, as his Phoenix count is now at a steady 4. That's, you know, good enough. He actually just stopped at 4 completely. Ow! Link wasn't done. Oops, daisy. This might have been overzealous from GuMiho, though. He doesn't have any medevacs here. He perhaps didn't realize the stalkers would be so numerous and so willing to engage. So no medevacs, no combat shields, no stim. Just finished up those last 2 upgrades, sure, but still a dangerous position to be in. Out on the map against a growing number of stalkers with only Marines. You got to be careful about that. Now with Marauders and medevacs, those stalkers should be shredded. Zest actually taking the fight. It's a little surprising, but he does have +1, so I think he does want to try and utilize this pressure as much as possible, knowing that he does need to buy time. He does have an opportunity to do some damage, and he does have an opportunity to do exactly this. Pop up into that main base. Now he's got to be careful about that blink back, and he knows that he scouts for it with a Phoenix and then recalls, loses a couple of stalkers on the recall, but better than what would have happened had he blunked to the low ground. Don't worry about Blunk being a real lord or not. So, GuMiho still has pretty good economy. With the Zest not being on a 4th Nexus, yes, GuMiho is on a good economy. And he also has some pretty good army. He's got bio with medevacs and upgrades at this point, which does make his army better than his opponents. Without a lot of charge lots here, without these 2 Colossus actually on the front lines, GuMiho's army is better, despite the army supply being even. Although he has chosen to go for a multi-pronged pressure. Now this could be tricky. The Phoenix can deal with the drops really well, but they can't necessarily deal with the units coming out of the drop well. So it's all a matter of catching it in time. But now that the army is disjointed, it's 50% of the bio army to the right, these stalkers can actually take that on. So it kind of feels like GuMiho is doing the understandable Terran thing of trying to catch the Protoss out of position, trying to make them make a bad mistake, a forced error, but is actually maybe missing an opportunity had he just collected his entire force together and rushed the third base. But of course, how could he know that? You know, he would have had to have rushed as soon as possible prior to the Colossus popping out, and that was a very small timing window indeed. Now, if he does it now, then, you know, it's easy peasy for Zest to hold. Especially with the shield battery. Zest now takes a bit of a lead, too. GuMiho is going to go for a command center, fourth command center on location. Really not at all that much later than his third. I mean, his third's not even saturated, so that's a choice right there. Not just say, oh, I have minerals, let's slap this down. It does now have a lot of production on the way. So the 4th CC, the double upgrades, he had gone for +2 weapons over +1 armor after +1 weapons, and triple barracks. So he's going to have a lot of production very soon. Scans ahead, sees 2 Colossus, couple of force fields, and a warp prism, and knows that it's just a bit of a tricky situation. Oh, he's going to try and get a sandwich, but Zest actually had reinforcements coming through, so it doesn't really turn into a sandwich. Ghost does get the EMP off before its death at the very least. Zest might have a very intimidating army, but he does now know that GuMiho has the potential for a sandwich and or a run-by. He's going to go for the base trade, but he's going to lose that orbital command. GuMiho is going to have to try and hold on to the natural with no siege units whatsoever. I don't know if this is actually the call to make, but here it goes. And, you know, it might be a bad call, but make the call, right? Better than waffling around. Wouldn't do get a couple of good shots, but not good enough to take on the entire Protoss army. No Liberators on the way, even if there were. There's still Phoenix in the skies to tear them down. GuMiho is going to be able to tear down 2 bases by the looks of things. 1 base and a handful of the technology, the production facilities, actually. But at the end of the day, Zest's army might just be more intimidating. He's going to be able to take down a lot of the reinforcing units of GuMiho with a much bigger army, so Zest should be 100% taking a better fight. He absolutely does. And, I mean, if GuMiho had been able to save 100% of his reinforcements and continue producing, I mean, there's a strong chance he can come back home and play out this base trade. But having lost even those handful of units in the main, losing his production, of course, as a Terran player, probably going to put him on the losing side. It is still very close, though. I mean, the army supplies are favoring Zest, but he's got a planetary to tackle. No, actually, GuMiho, I mean, I think you have to defend. I think you have to hope the planetary takes down something. By looks of things, a couple of Stalkers might go down. The Marines even trying their best to tear down the Phoenix count is better than nothing, and the planetary does get those last couple of shots. GuMiho might even focus fired right there. But GuMiho, again, loses out on some of those reinforcements. A couple of those medevacs, a handful of Marines that we're trying to support. We got ourselves a good old-fashioned real base race. So that is, the last building has to die for GuMiho to actually win this game. Otherwise, having to go back home and try and tackle the entire Protoss army probably ain't going to work out. Now, that said, the Terran army, known for being more mobile, you know, has the flying units, could maybe find Zest a little disjointed. Maybe a Colossus is a little too far forward. Boom, you snipe that off. Maybe the Zealots are running around like chickens with their heads cut off, and boom, suddenly 12 Zealots go down while the rest of the army catches up to them. That could still happen. But I do believe in the power of Zest's army. He was able to get a Nexus down. Even a couple of cannons are already done. So we got static defense supporting his army. We got a warp prism supporting his army as well. So that is a huge contributor to the fight. Microing the Colossus to ensure their health, to ensure their life is huge. Without that, there is a very good chance that GuMiho would capture at least one of them before they really get the damage done. But GuMiho, you know, he knows that he has to all in. He does not have an orbital command. No use slapping those barracks down to produce. He's supply blocked. And there you have it. You gotta pull the trigger. But there's 3 Colossus, a couple of cannons. Yeah, the Stalkers aren't really the frontline units you would want. The Zealots actually get super choked in here. So many of them not contributing to the fight, but it's okay. GG, Zest wins game 4 and brings us to map 5. See you there.